Hey everybody, it's Kyle Jensel, your driven autism dad. Today I want to talk about how being a mama bear, and this is going to make you upset, is most likely hurting your child on the spectrum. Let me give you a couple of stories to illustrate what I mean by this. When my son was in middle school, Eric, my more severe son on the spectrum, my wife one day called me up and asked me to go to an IEP with him and her. And I had heard about IEPs before and how they could be contentious and frustrating and kind of a fight for your kids' rights. And so I said, okay, no problem. I'm ready. I'll show up and I said, do you want me to look mean? And she said, no, don't look mean. I just need you to be quiet and listen and take notes because I'm not very good at taking notes. I said, well, do you want me to say something? Do you want me to, demand? She said, no, I need you to be quiet and just listen and watch and take notes. And I said, well, what am I there for? And she said, because you're there to take notes. You're not there to say anything. I need you to look at people kindly, be friendly, let that part of you show through. And it was confusing to me. I was like, what the heck? This is an IEP meeting. I think, aren't we supposed to fight for our kids' rights in IEP meetings? But I didn't say anything. I just showed up. And when we walked in, I'll never forget what my wife did. My wife started the IEP meeting by going around the room and introducing herself to each person individually. And before the IEP meeting even started, she said, basically, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I'll give you the gist of it. She said, thank you all for being here. I know I want to tell each and every one of you, I really appreciate what you're doing. I didn't choose this, but you did, and I really appreciate it. And I know that our son Eric can be difficult. I know that he can be very challenging at times, but I also know that he feels safe here and he feels loved. And thank you so much, every single one of you. And she went around the room and just personally mentioned each person as she did this. And it was amazing to watch. I could see the people when they first got to the IEP, it's almost like you're going into a boxing match, right? People are ready to get into it. And she changed the tone by being so kind and friendly and loving to each and every one of these people that there wasn't a dry eye in the room. So all these people, even the men, even me, were tearing up because you could hear in my wife's heart how much she appreciated and cared for these individuals. And the IEP meeting was amazing. These individuals in this room bent over backwards to help my son on the spectrum. And it was amazing for me to watch. And as we were leaving, I remember asking my wife, what was that? And she said, sometimes these IEP meetings can be contentious, and I don't want them to be that way. I want them to know how much I care and that I know they care for my son. And she said, you get more, I can't remember the term, but my wife was a feminine Southern woman. And she said, you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And it was amazing to me because it immediately set me on this path of holy moly, that, when we talk about fighting for rights and fighting for advocacy and fight, she didn't fight. She loved these people into really giving them more than really what she desired and wanted. And it was amazing to me too, because I know after that meeting, I walked out of there knowing that they were treating my son better than any other kid in that class because of my wife and the way she poured love all over the situation. Well, it got me to thinking about my own situation and how I had kind of become, I don't know, angry and bitter. And I'm a fighter by nature. And so I had become kind of angry and bitter. And, when people would stare, I'd say something to them. I was not afraid of conflict, and I was not afraid to get into it with people. So after this meeting, I remember going to work, and at the time I worked for my brother, and I went to my brother Craig because he'll tell me the truth. Some people won't tell me the truth. I said, Craig, am I bitter or angry and he said, well, let me just say this. He said, angry young men turn into angry, bitter old men. And it shook me a little bit because I realized what he was saying is that, and is that I was on that path, right? And I said, am I bitter and angry? And he said, you know what? I get it. You've had to fight for your kids. You've had to fight for everything. You've had to fight for their rights. It's hard. It's tough. I understand. I'm not mad at you, Kyle. I understand why you are the way you are. I get it. I would probably be the same way, but I wasn't very happy about that. I don't want to be a bitter, angry old man, right? And my wife certainly wasn't what people would call a mama bear, but I think I was a papa bear, and I didn't want to be that way. I wanted to be like my wife. I wanted to love people and to get him services through love and kindness. So I'll never forget, I went home shortly after that, and I started paying a lot of attention to how I treated everybody. And I realized that I was bitter and angry and frustrated a lot of the time. And I think that was bleeding into my relationships with everyone, certainly my brother, even my wife on occasions, friends. I actually went and talked to some friends, and they agreed, and they said, we get it. I mean, you've had to fight. We can see why it's made you who you are. And so I came home and I thought, I can't have this, right? I know when you're a fighter and when you're angry and when you're bitter and when you're frustrated, that bleeds into your family. It bleeds into the people that you care about. And those people that I cared about didn't need that part of me. So I remember I sat down and I started writing out things. And I want to challenge you, whether you're a mama bear or a papa bear, and I want to challenge you and let you know it is not in your kid's best interest to be angry or bitter or frustrated, because it's going to bleed into them. And I wrote down a list of things, and here it is. And I'm going to challenge you. And if you find yourself, if we find ourselves angry at minor things, let's check ourselves. If we find ourselves disliking people in general and wondering why they're commonly so stupid, let's check ourselves. If we find ourselves holding grudges and wishing ill on other people or upset when people stare, let's check ourselves. If we find ourselves jealous, internally jealous, or wishing our lives were better, we should probably check ourselves. If we find ourselves making no change in our life and wondering why we still have it so hard, let's check ourselves. If we find ourselves struggling to accept any advice from anybody because they don't understand our situation, let's check ourselves. If we find ourselves unhappy because other people are happy, we should probably check ourselves. And if we find ourselves unwilling to enjoy other people's success, we should probably check ourselves. You can see this list was long for me, right? There were so many things that I was doing that was leading me towards a path away from goodness and kindness and love and towards bitterness and anger and frustration. And if we find ourselves talking about other people and spreading gossip, we should better check ourselves. You can tell how bitter and angry and again, I felt justified, right? I was a papa bear. I was fighting for my kids, for my family. I was fighting, and it made me a fighter, and that made me angry and bitter and frustrated. So bottom line is this, mama bears and papa bears, being a mama bear is most likely hurting your child on the spectrum. When you go into these meetings and it's contentious and there's anger and there's frustration and the other people feel that, don't think for one moment, and they shouldn't do this, but don't think for one moment they don't take this out on your kids. They do. But here's the beautiful part of this. When you go in there with kindness and patience and love, and when you treat other people who work with your kids with kindness and patience and love, they'll feel that, and they'll treat our kids better. I used to call it manipulation. My wife called it engineering. Because she was honest and true, and she was very kind and patient and loving throughout this process. So being a mama bear is not a badge of honor. Being a papa bear is not a badge of honor. Most likely you are hurting your child on the spectrum. That's the secret for the day. Hopefully this is helpful. If you disagree, if you agree, that's okay. I'm okay with whatever it is. Let me know in the comments. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.